This is a long story, as it's been over 5 years in the making. I've actually talked about this story before, but there are some really good internet sleuths here on Reddit, and they were able to figure out ex-beauty queen's identity and mine too. I don't really care if I give it my identity, but I don't want it to be on my actual account, so I deleted it a while back. The catalyst for me to repost it today on a throwaway is that it's cathartic. Last week, yet another court date for ex-beauty queen Stalker came and went. We had been expecting things to proceed with her entering a plea of guilty, or not guilty, but no such luck. All we got was another vague reason as to why she's not ready and a new court date issued, months from now. There have been many court dates since she has been arrested. It's been over 18 months since she had been arrested for continued stalking and harassment, and she still wants to drag things on, to seemingly try and stay relevant in our lives. As an aside, the amount of court resources and taxpayers' money that's wasted is actually really astounding. Anyway, on to the story. To recap, my husband dated a beauty queen, title holder of a well-known pageant before me. They broke up long before we met. She was a statuesque blonde, very tall and a knockout in her day in my opinion. This is somewhat important to the story, I guess. But while she was a dazzling pageant winner on the outside, on the inside, oh boy, she could be charming and beautiful if she needed to. But mostly, she treated people around her terribly, including my husband, and he eventually broke it off with her. But she never went away. She would continue to call and email repeatedly, even after my husband and I had met. If anything, her calls increased. She would call over and over again, day and night, even after my husband, then boyfriend, had blocked her number. She would ask for money, and threatened to go to the police, claiming that he had hurt her if he didn't give it to her. He obviously didn't give her the money, and this made her very upset. The threats increased and became more malicious, but when that didn't work, she would switch up tactics and try and sweetly ask him for help with certain projects she was trying to get up off the ground, or more accurately, have him do the work for her and she'd take the credit, with the promise that, if he did just this last thing for her, she would go away. He didn't reply. She would go back to being malicious then. Any tactic for attention, or for what she really wanted, money. My husband was terrified, because of course, while he never did anything to her, it would be her word over his, and he was terrified of ruining his reputation and career. We unfortunately ended up at an event that she also attended. She had been waiting for us to arrive and had placed herself near the entrance of the event. As we walked in, she stood across the room, looking me up and down, laughing and whispering into the ear of her date, making a point to try and make me uncomfortable. But that was okay. She was easily ignored until she had ambushed me as I came out of the bathroom. She had clearly been waiting for a moment that I was alone. She towered over me. She is very tall, and I had no intention of having it out with her. And as I hurriedly walked to find my husband, she kept pace beside me, hunched over. So she was at my eye level. I'm 5'5", her head turned towards me. She was like a caricature of herself as she ambled beside me, smiling crazily. "Where's your man?" she hissed in her heavy accent. Her eyes were black. She looked like she was out of a Tim Burton movie, hunched over with that crazy demonic smile. "Watch your back, Pug," she added, grinning. She liked to call me names like Pug because I own pugs, and I guess she thought it was an insult. What I didn't know then was, while I was in the bathroom, she had walked over to my husband and had thrown her arm around him while he was in mid-conversation with someone, and introduced herself to the man he was talking to, as if she and my husband were together. My husband unwrapped himself from her clutches and told her to beat it. She then beelined and waited for me to come out of the washroom. We stopped going to the parties after that. The last time that we ran into her was at a funeral for a mutual friend. She followed me around at the wake. As my husband, boyfriend at the time, was talking to the man's widow, I was talking to a friend and his wife. She walked right up and stood with us, joining us mid-conversation as if she were a part of the group. It was unnerving but also just bizarre. It was a funeral and I didn't want a scene. I silently picked my wine glass off the bar and walked away, leaving her with the couple that I had been speaking to, and her staring at me with a smirk on her face. All in all, it was annoying but still manageable. However, the emails, calls, and everything never stopped. She would call my husband over and over day and night, even though he had long blocked her number. She would drive by. I found my car keyed one night after I left it outside, but obviously I couldn't prove that it was her. But enough was enough. My husband had a lawyer send a cease and desist. After the first, she had called him from a private number. He answered and she said, "Hi, it's me," in a sing-song voice like they were the best of friends, and he hadn't just sent her a lawyer's letter ordering her to stay away from him and his family. He said nothing and hung up. Another cease and desist was sent, and then a third. But nothing would make her go away. She did not actually think my husband was capable of not wanting to be with her, because, you know, her beauty. Eventually, though, she got pissed that he wasn't giving in. So, she decided to take this rage to the internet. I knew that she was absolutely checking out my social media, but I don't really use it much, so I didn't care. However, she created a fake Twitter account and tweeted, "My husband's name is a fraud," and tagged all his colleagues, friends, investors, and family members. Every single person she could think of to try and ruin his reputation and career. On New Year's Eve, she posted on my Instagram account at exactly 12:01 a.m. "Happy New Year's, Scrud." Social media settings were all put to private. We went to the police, armed with the emails threatening to give her money or she would go to the police, and she was charged with 2 counts of harassment, and a restraining order was put into place. To our shock, the next day after her arrest, our phones were buzzing. This story had made the front page news. It was clearly a slow news day. Her day in court came right before everything with the pandemic happened, and we arrived at the courthouse and sat down. She walked in and we were shocked by her appearance. Actually, shocked is an understatement. She was unrecognizable from her former self. Gone was the statuesque, dazzling blonde. She had apparently shaved her head and was wearing a short, ratty brown wig. She had gained about 80 pounds, give or take, and was now sort of hunched. With her height and new girth, she looked like a linebacker. And to add to her new look, she wore a bulky brown men's overcoat and a scarf tied over her wig like a babushka. My immediate thought was, her outside now matches her inside. But it was her eyes that I had noticed the most. About a year earlier, we had shown a photo of her to our kids so that if she ever approached them, they knew to run. At the time, my son, who was young, commented that she had mean eyes. From the mouth of babes. Maybe it was that she had changed so much physically overall, but her dark eyes had narrowed into deep black slits. As she scanned the courtroom and saw us in court, she would turn around every so often to look back at us and glare. She would then whisper in her lawyer's ear and laugh as if she were having a grand time. She had a pair of big, round, cheap sunglasses that she would put on and take off intermittently. When she addressed the judge, she would put them on, and he had asked her to remove them. We thought that she was putting on a brave face and treating it all like a joke, but we were about to find out that getting arrested wouldn't slow her down. The restraining order didn't seem to faze her at all. If anything, it angered her even more. From then on, every day, night and day, she would post from multiple fake social media accounts, posting photos of myself and of my husband. She would put up my husband's photo with horrible captions that included bad things and comments and captions that I can't mention. And she also would post altered and unflattering photos of myself. She would call me old and ugly, and those are just the G-rated ones. Listen, I'm no beauty queen myself. The name calling, while obsessive and gross, wasn't what bothered me most. Although I'm not going to lie, seeing hundreds of photos of myself on her fake Twitter account, calling me ugly and obsessively pointing out every single flaw, did succeed in getting me down at times. Why did I keep looking? Because it was like getting a glimpse into her unraveled mind, just in case it was a clue of what she was capable or thinking of doing next. Because it wasn't her insulting posts that fazed me. What bothered me the most were these sinister captions. Keep an eye on your kids because I'll be watching. Or, why don't you plant some flowers in your front yard? Or, be good to your kids because you never know what could happen. How was your Uber Eats order? She would post pictures of me with an arrow directed to my head, which I perceived to be a gun to my head. She posted pictures of my husband's workplace, which she was not allowed to be within 2 blocks of, in accordance to the restraining order. But the police said that this could be just a picture she took from the internet. Sigh. She posted Agatha Christie quotes like, "Every killer is usually someone you know well," or "Your end is near." Her Twitter profile banner picture was taken from a movie poster and said "Stalker," like she was in on the joke. We called the police again, but they said that there wasn't anything they could do since she didn't explicitly tag us. I took screenshots of everything though. Many of her posts were nonsensical, but most were photos posted of us on this fake account, all altered with ominous captions, but we just couldn't get her to shut it down. I became anxious anytime my kids were outside shooting hoops in the driveway. My elderly mother wouldn't take the baby out in the stroller. She was too scared. It affected all of our lives. Life became dramatic. Ex-beauty queen would taunt us with, "Catch me if you can." She posted close-ups of her dogs, you know what, and a piece of her dog's crap with my name beside it, the implication obvious. It bothered me that she now had a dog, since I don't think someone like her was capable of caring for anything living. And then the calls started back up, this time to our home line. Yeah, I know we still have a home phone. She would just say mean things and then hang up, like karma will get you, and then weird chant-like calls as if she were reciting a spell. Sure enough, she posted photos of a pentagram and candles, and some sort of altar in the caption, "Ring ring." Finally, and I mean finally, the police asked us to come in and give us video statements. We gave them a drive containing thousands of screenshots of posts that she had made. They arrested her again and charged her with 2 more counts of criminal harassment. My husband was angry at this point, but as Mama Bear, I just wanted to get this over with. She mentioned the kids frequently and ominously many times in her online rants, also calling them rude names, which I won't repeat here, because these are the things that upset me the most. The judge also issued a social media ban for her. By the time that she was rearrested for the second time, her fake Twitter account, which was literally mostly insults or references to my family, had 16,000 tweets in about 3 months. She had no followers, so they were just to herself. The inappropriate sites that I had been being tagged in stopped, and things quieted down tremendously. But I still get follower requests that I believe are her. But at this point, we were all on edge. I kid you not. I felt weird walking into my kitchen at night to make a sandwich, feeling creeped out that she was outside watching. I put nothing past her, as nothing is more dangerous than a desperate woman who has nothing to lose, which, by the way, was one of the quotes that she had posted. I don't know what is wrong with her, but I believe from what I've researched that she is a malignant narcissist. Perhaps some other mental issues are at play here, but I can say that she was a terrible person long before she decided to try and make our lives miserable. Just a crazy beauty queen turned stalker. I would love nothing more than to never meet her again. But if going to court helps you stay away from us forever, then bring it. As an aside, I wanted to mention that we heard from a reliable source that after my husband had broke up with her, she had become well known to the police for other reasons. While my husband dodged a bullet regarding her threats to go to the police saying that he had abused her, apparently other men have not been so lucky. Since I can't post pictures, I'll leave you with one of her posts. One that may not make much sense, but to us, it was a statement to let us know that she enjoys this drawn-out court process. Many of her posts are in her native language, so this is translated. Violent women and the cruelest never answer questions. They like to continue the misunderstanding indefinitely. So I seek to contact people only in order to torment them. My cruelty is my last attachment to the world, and my last chic. In December 2018, my ex and I split up after 7 years in a relationship. I was new to the dating game, so I didn't just want to jump back into it. In February, I met a guy at the bar that we regular. The second time that I met him, we exchanged phone numbers. By the end of March, I was feeling pretty comfortable and I invited him to a party at my house. He had stayed after the party and one thing led to another. Well, after it was all said and done, I had a weird vibe. He was too pushy and it really made me uncomfortable, and so I asked him to leave. I planned to never speak to him again. That is until he started to text me from random phone numbers. He would say things like, "Hope you have fun fishing," when I didn't post on any social media that I was going fishing. "I hope the movie was good," when I hadn't posted anything online that I was at the movies. He would text me and ask me where in the bar I was at, different bars when I never told anyone or posted where we were going. We had no mutual friends, so he was following me. The final straw was when my friends took me to Washington, D.C. for my 25th birthday celebration, and we bar hopped all over the city. Around 2:30 in the morning, we came out of the last bar that we were at and decided to get cookies across the street. As we were coming out of the cookie shop, guess who pops up? You guessed it, he does. He goes, "I hope blank and blank were fun. I wanted to say hi earlier since you haven't been replying to my messages, but I didn't want to freak you out." I was terrified. My friend's husband thankfully stepped in and called him out and threatened to call the cops. I changed my phone number and moved. Thankfully, I haven't heard from him since. Update. After all the comments saying that I should still reach out to the police, and that he could still be stalking me, I decided that it was probably best to do that. I contacted my local police, and they advised me to contact the police where I had previously lived. I did so, and I still live close enough that I went on Tuesday to file the paperwork for a restraining order. Thankfully, I know his full name and his place of employment so that they will be able to locate him. I provided all the text messages and screenshots that I have, and now we will wait for him to be served. It'll only be a temporary 15-day restraining order. It will be extended because our local courthouse docket is on a staggered schedule due to the virus. So, once we've been given a court date, we will go. I was told by the sheriff that it shouldn't be an issue getting a judge to approve a restraining order for 2 years with all the evidence that I have, and the testimony from my friends who had witnessed all these events. Thank you all so much for the advice. I've been needing to express myself about what happened between October 2017 and February 2019. So, for some backstory to try to answer some questions before they get asked. I graduated from school in 2016 and wasn't working at the time. It wasn't like I didn't try to find work. I did, I just didn't get many calls back. I had a couple of job interviews, but they all fell flat. And it didn't help that I stupidly refused to put my resume forward to the local supermarkets because most of the high school bullies work at which the thought of working with a group of people who terrorized me for 4 years, it filled me with too much anxiety. So instead, I spent most of the time surrounded with the select few friends that I had, which in the end wasn't that many at all. I was always sort of the quiet one at high school, and early on into school, I got a girlfriend. I spent most of my time developing our relationship further instead of finding friends. A mistake that I would come to regret when we split up right before high school had ended. I didn't really have many friends to fall back on. I had one really close friend throughout all of high school that we will call Sam, as I don't want to use any real names. Sam was really supportive when me and my girlfriend had broke up. He also had a great job, a really nice family, money, and friends, and at the time was a pretty good influence on me, as my parents would say. He didn't do any drugs or drink. I looked up to him as a person and a best friend. So it was a really easy decision when Sam asked me to move in with him when he had found a cheap rental property. Sam's family were friends with a small real estate agent office, so it was easy for Sam to find the place, even if it was stupidly overpriced for the condition of the house. And we were stupid and our parents just wanted us out. Sam's family believed that he was too successful for them to need to support him, and my parents and my stepdad wanted me out because he was tired of needing to support me. Again, I wasn't working at the time. Sam and I moved out with his childhood friend who we will call Blake. Now, before we had moved, I had never met him, and he was really never home because he was always out for work or he was dirt bike riding. He lived with us for about 4 months before the first big terrible event happened. Sam let 2 strangers from Blake's perspective sleep in his bed when he was away from home. Blake got home one night at 2:30 in the morning, ready for bed to walk into his room, to see 2 teenagers getting it on in his bed. And he left the next day, and as far as I know to this day, after their last argument, they never talked to each other again. So, with that brief intro, this is where I will get into the bulk of the post, starting from February 2018. At this point, I had a good source of income. I had gotten a job through my dad and was enjoying being out of the house. By this time, I was starting to suspect that something was wrong with Sam. He wasn't leaving to go to work before me, which was weird. He was increasingly snappy and angry all the time, and he was leaving work early all the time and didn't tell me where he was going. In the end, he was cheating on his girlfriend at the time, with a girl from our high school. The first few months, with my friend acting this way, he would threaten to move all of my stuff out of the house and onto the road if I didn't do something that he said, like cleaning up the house on my own, going shopping, or things like that. I didn't have much, only my mattress. He had accidentally broken my bed frame while I was at work, and my office computer, which I used for Discord and playing games, so it wouldn't have been hard for him to actually do it. He never did, but I guess it was because I never really argued with him. He started stealing my clothes, which didn't even fit him, and would let me borrow his shirts to brag about how good of a friend he was. Eventually, he just stopped cooking food for himself. Sam's dad had given him a fuel card to use for petrol. He used to buy fast food twice a day for months at a time, until his dad cut him off from the card, in which he turned to a 2-liter bottle of iced coffee and McDonald's nightly. I understand that this was more of his business and not mine, but he eventually asked me to cover his part of the rent, as he couldn't afford bills, which made it my issue. He asked me to buy him food, and when I refused, he would guilt trip me into feeling like an absolute piece of crap, and he would block the entrance to the house or my doorway to my room. I was already really anxious since he had started getting more aggressive and angry, so I often agreed, which left me struggling with money. At some stage, he just stopped going to work. As he explained it, work let me leave early today and they said they would call me in again if they needed me. We got into an argument and I told him that he was wrong and he still had to go to work. It took him 10 weeks to call up his work who explained to him that they had met for that day and that they had registered him as abandoning his job, so he ended up unemployed. I tried to support him as much as he had for me during my breakup and when I moved in when I was unemployed, but he got really mad and angry at me all the time, which he took out on me, screaming at me for being right. Because of all his free time, he started inviting the girl from high school over all the time, threatening me to keep it a secret from his girlfriend. Obviously, in the end, I didn't since I was close with Sam's current girlfriend. I was actively trying to stay out of the house, so I only ever saw this girl over 2 or 3 times, but in reality, she was over all the time when I was at work, probably about 4 times a day. For the more tragic part of when I was living with him, he decided to buy some pets. He was given a bird from his family. He had bought a dog which he called Sparta, and he decided to buy a cat which he called Skittles for the girl from high school, which eventually ran away. He bought another cat and called it Skittles again. And the state that this kitten was left in was appalling. When either the girl or I wasn't around, it was revealed that he would lock the kitten in a closet and only feed her when he remembered to. I should have tried harder to protect the animals in this house. I tried my best to feed them when Sam wasn't around, but when he caught food missing, he would question me. When he found me feeding his cat, he would grab me, slam me into the wall, and screamed at me for poisoning his animals. I remember that he hit me really hard. One day I came home and the bird that he had kept near the door wasn't there and Sam wasn't home. I had asked him where the bird was and apparently it had fallen over in its cage and had broken its neck. This is where immediate panic started and I realized that I was living with someone who was much more than depressed. Sam came home later and I was ready to explode at him. I was filled with rage and anger for what he had done to the bird. With an empty shoebox, he proceeded to go to our backyard. I followed him and it turns out that he had the box to bury the kitten, who according to Sam had done the same thing, jumping around in the closet. I remember the way that he told me vividly. He wasn't sad or angry. He was empty. His eyes felt hollow and he told me that he wasn't sad about it. He went back inside to his room and locked himself in there. I didn't see him for nearly a week. I came home one day from a very tiring day of work. I had requested to get the morning off to clean for a house inspection. At this point, I believe that this was our second one, so I stayed behind at work to do some overtime. Sam thought that I was out for the night, and when I got home around 8:30, I found him and the girl from high school smoking in our lounge room. I didn't say a word, I couldn't. At this point, Sam wasn't the same person that I had went to high school with. Every day over the past 6 months, he had found a way to yell, steal, guilt, punch, kick, threaten me nearly every day, and there was always a reason that he hated me. He blamed me for what had happened to the bird and cat, because I wasn't there to stop them from hurting themselves. This was one of the final turning points for me. I went to bed and had a sleepless night. I heard Sam insult me. I heard him cheat on his girlfriend. I heard him lie about money, being employed and using everything he remembered from high school to impress her. The next day, I told his girlfriend, I stole this dog who was in incredibly bad shape, even after I had been sneakily feeding him a handful of dry food twice a day. I called the RSPCA and reported him. I emailed photos that I took of the house for proof. I used the cover of the real estate agent coming over for an inspection to protect myself from him overreacting. when I came back to collect the last of my things, which was my old PC, I stupidly entered the house thinking that our real estate agent was in there. I thought her car was there when it wasn't. I was greeted in the hallway by a shirtless Sam who pushed me against the wall. He smelled of weed and alcohol, and it was burning into my skin. He pushed me up against the wall with one hand and showed me a knife in the other hand. He had me pinned against the wall with a knife in his hand. There was a long argument, which was him more screaming at me and me shaking and not being able to spit out my words. He got angry when I told him where his dog was, so he choked me and ran the sliver of the knife down my arm. I remember feeling like I blacked out everything and it was a blur. He kept getting more and more intense, going on about how I betrayed him as a friend and his girlfriend had dumped me over him. He let go of my neck and pushed me harder into the wall with his shoulder and drew the knife close to my neck. I truly felt like this was the end. I muttered out, "My friends can hear you." We were close enough to my room, and he often knows when I left my room, I always had Discord open. He let go of me and I ran away to my car and left. I stayed with my parents for a couple of days, living on their couch, too afraid to really talk to anyone that my parents called me Jumpy, and I told them that I'd missed them because I had hardly seen them over the past 10 months or so. Sam chucked me a message saying that we need to talk, which we did in a public place. He told me that he was moving out back to his parents because he could no longer support himself, and the house had too many bad memories for him. He left. To this day, I still haven't seen him. This was around August of 2018, and people from high school stopped being his friends once the girl and I told all of our collective friends what he did and how he had acted. I reported him to the police. I never pressed charges, but I told them that I never wanted to see Sam again. I don't think anything ever came of it. I couldn't afford to get a restraining order, as I recall being told that they cost money, but it is reported. I moved back into the house on my own. He left all of his furniture and bedding as it was, only taking his headphones, his PS4 and his TV. From that moment on, I was alone and living in the house that my best friend nearly killed me in, sleeping on his couch in the lounge room because I couldn't afford my own. I was alone and I was in a really bad headspace. I stopped talking to all of my friends and at work, and I started having nightmares. So, this was dating from October 2017 to August 2018, and I was still in the house until early 2019, which, living in the aftermath of what Sam did to me, was as bad if not worse than living without him. The isolation and darkness and things I saw and regret not doing, like not being there to save the bird and the cat, they still eat away at me. Things didn't get better, and then worse until I met a girl. I've been writing this for about 3 hours, and I'm more than happy to write up the other part of this story, which I'll likely be doing in confessions or here once I feel more up for it. Talking about this has been really hard for me. So, where am I now? At the end of 2019, I met my current partner. She is absolutely incredible, and we actually bought a house together last month. We currently live with my parents until we move in 2 weeks, and I think all my negative feelings about my old house and Sam have resurfaced due to me moving again. So, I was living with my grandparents at the time, and they lived in a far-out residential area of town at the end of a road that then leads into farming areas. They were in a townhouse complex, and fortunately, right at the front which meant it was a 1-minute walk out of the complex to the bus stop right across the street. My stop was the very last one on the route. One day, I was waiting at the bus stop that's right near the trendy downtown area of my city, but a little out of the way. It's a relatively small city and doesn't have the greatest busing system. There are only 2 buses that stopped on this particular stop. The one to my place and the one into the next town over. This was its last stop before hitting the freeway. This stop is also right next to the restaurant where my then fiance, now husband, worked as a manager. I was sitting there texting my fiance as he was just starting to close up. It was around 4 p.m., but it was a lunch joint. And a kinda sketchy, dirty-looking old guy comes up and sits down on the bench. There was plenty of room, so it wasn't a big deal. After a moment, he starts to make conversation. This was around 2 years ago, so I don't remember exactly what he was saying, but I asked if he was taking the bus into the nearby city, and he said that he was and that he lived there. The whole time that he was there, he was almost comically manspreading, with one leg up on the bench, proudly displaying his crotch. I ignored this and politely responded to him, when necessary, while texting my fiance. My bus arrives. Creepy guy gets on. This is not the bus to the nearby town. I'm a little weirded out at this point, and I mention it to my fiance in my text. I was sitting at the back of the bus and he was sitting at the very front, but turned all the way around so he could face me. He was staring at me. Oh heck no. The bus goes through some residential areas and then makes a brief stop at a little strip mall, and then it's just houses from there until the end. I'm texting my fiance and getting more and more creeped out, as he does nothing but look at me when I'm not watching. We hit the strip mall and he doesn't get off, and now I'm legit freaked out. There's nowhere else for him to go. I text my fiance and tell him this, and he immediately calls me, says to act normal and that he's coming to meet me at the bus stop. Don't get off anywhere else and don't interact. My husband is now a security guard and going into policing, so he's taking the situation pretty seriously. I somewhat loudly respond, "Okay, yeah, I'll see you there, babe." Creepy guy immediately turns around and faces the front. Holy crap. I spend the next 5 minutes anxiously thinking of what I'll do if he isn't there when I get to my stop. I can't just go into my house if he gets off the bus. He'll know where I live. We come around the corner to the very last stop and this guy still hasn't gotten off. He's very intentionally facing as far away from me as possible now. I get off the bus just as my fiance pulls up, and this guy does not. This is the last stop, and the bus is not going on the reverse route. This guy was following me. My fiance ended up walking me to my door, checking the house and making me lock everything up until my grandparents got home. I was pretty shaken up, to be honest. He went back to work to finish closing up, but he came back again later. All in all, I'm lucky to have a husband and best friend who took me so seriously. And I'm not sure what would have happened had I not gotten that call from him that he was coming. I'm a 17-year-old girl who attended college until recently. My parents don't drive, so I rode buses to get to class, mainly routes 50s and 60s that they led all the way to my college. One day, I received a message from an unknown person on Facebook, and it was an older man in his 50s. He said hello, and I was wondering who it was at this point. I asked him, and he told me that he's a bus driver, and then he sees me on my commute every day and thought that I was cute. Now, I never talked to this guy, so he must have intentionally read my bus card while I was swiping it, and found out my name and then found me on Facebook. I was so creeped out and he asked me to go get coffee with him. When I told him that I had a boyfriend, he told me that he only wanted to be friends with me. I blocked him after that. A few weeks ago, I received another message from another account, with the same name of the guy asking me how I am. I replied saying that it wasn't his business and to leave me alone. When he then inquired if I was single and that if I was single, he could fix that. I told him to please never talk to me again and I blocked him. However, I am almost sure that I'll hear from him in a few weeks' time as it keeps repeating itself. I'm really scared of getting on those routes, especially at night or early morning, because I'd be terrified if I ended up alone with him on the bus. He sent me bad photos of himself and selfies as well.